Hi, this is Dan Heisman, Philly tutor for Chess FM, and this is the Improve Your Chess series for ICC members. In today's video, we're going to do our 18th in our series of opening Tabiyas. We've covered many of the major openings. Today we're going to talk about some of the classical systems in the modern Benoni, the variation of the Benoni that Michael Tal, world champion Tal, made popular back in the late 50s. And as we almost always do, with one or two exceptions, we're going to use the New in Chess Opening Essentials series to be our guideline. I call these kind of books Tabiya books. They don't have the kind of detail that you would have on one opening. Like, for instance, I could be using a book just on the modern Benoni, or I could go the other direction and have an encyclopedia that covers just every single opening. These are Tabiya books. They usually come in a series like 3 or 4, and they try to cover all the major openings and explain them, unlike an encyclopedia like MCO, where they can pretty much just list the moves. All right, so let's start out with the main moves of the modern Benoni. White plays d4. Black plays knight f6. It's an Indian system. White plays c4. And now the normal Benoni sequence here is to play c5. And White has a couple of moves he can play here. The second most popular is knight f3. And the most popular is to maintain the pressure in the center by playing d5. Now, in looking up the databases to make this video, I came across the fact that, of course, this is the position where you can also play the Benko Gambit with b5. And I was wondering how popular the modern Benoni was compared to the Benko Gambit. And what I found was very interesting, that in the two databases that I looked in, the modern Benoni was roughly half, just slightly less half popular than the Benko Gambit, which is interesting, which means if you're White in this position, you could probably expect the Benko Gambit at least twice as often as someone will play the modern Benoni. Now, in the old Benoni, Black used to play something like d6, and then he would play e5 and try to lock the center. That's not the way that Michael Tal started playing it in the 1950s. What Tal did was first he would play e6, and after White would play knight c3, he would take right away to force an asymmetric position. Now notice, if we draw a line between the C and the D files, and we look on the right side, White has a 5-on-4 majority, and in the endgame, he could create a passed pawn. And Black has a 3-on-2 majority on the queen side, where he can also create a passed pawn. And this kind of imbalances makes for interesting middle games, which is why, for one reason, I'm sure Tal chose this, because I'm sure Tal, being a dynamic player, liked imbalances. All right, so after C takes d5, Black doesn't have to play d6 here. There's no real threat for White to play d6. For instance, if Black plays g6 and White plays d6, I believe Black can maybe play something like queen to b6, hitting that pawn twice. And I don't know if bishop g5, if bishop f4 is going to be enough. Let's ask the computer a second and see what it says. Computer says this position is even. All right, so it thinks after queen b6 that White should just play knight f3 with advantage. But the computer likes White a little bit here, so that would be a good reason probably not to play g6. So most grandmasters here play d6 right away, even if d6 for White isn't much of a threat. And now, since the knight is guarding e4, the most common move is e4, and Black plays g6. Now, there's lots of lines in the modern Benoni, and the most dynamic lines are the ones where White tries to go for early e5 breaks with f.